He sat alone at table 4, surrounded by a rooftop full of people who looked like they belonged to each other. Laughter skimmed across the air like champagne bubbles. Soft jazz curled around conversations. The skyline beyond the glass railing glittered as if New York City had decided to dress up just to prove a point. Love was real, joy was easy, and everyone had somewhere to be when the night ended. Adrian Blackwell had nowhere to be. At least, that was what he'd told himself when he stepped out of the elevator earlier, straightened the sleeves of his tailored suit, and glanced at the reserved sign that carried his name. He hadn't done this for himself. He had done it because his mother's voice still had a way of reaching into his chest, grabbing the part of him that used to believe in soft things and shaking it awake. Just one date, Adrian. One. You don't have to promise anything, just show up. Let yourself feel the possibility again. Possibility. What a lovely word people used before disappointment made it bitter. He checked his watch again. The second hand moved with the kind of confidence he didn't feel. 30 minutes. His espresso had gone lukewarm. His fingers had tapped the rim of the cup so many times the porcelain felt warm beneath his skin. He had stared at the elevator doors so long he could picture them opening even when he blinked. He wasn't angry. That was the strange part. Anger required hope. Anger required the belief that something might have gone differently. What he felt was something colder. A quiet, dry certainty that love, and all the performances people attached to it, was just another market crash waiting to happen. "She's not coming," he murmured, the words disappearing into the night like breath on glass. He should have stood immediately. He should have walked out, gone back to the office, buried himself in numbers and contracts and the kind of problems that could be solved with strategy. That was what he did. That was what he was good at. But his body didn't move right away, and he hated that too. He hated the flicker of something that looked like embarrassment, even though there was no one at his table to witness it. He hated the way a rooftop cafe could make a grown man feel like a boy again, sitting in a chair too big for him, waiting for a promise that might never show up. The boy version of Adrian had waited too. He saw it with a painful sharpness sometimes, like the past was a glass shard that never quite worked its way out. 17 years old, backpack hanging off one shoulder, stepping into his family's home earlier than usual because a teacher had let class out. He remembered the smell, cleaner, lemony, too bright for what he found. His mother on the kitchen floor, knees tucked in, one hand clutching a photograph so tightly the paper tore. His father's smile in that photo had been wide, confident, like he'd never known how much damage he could do. And beside his father, someone else. Another woman, another life, another set of promises. Adrian remembered dropping his backpack and calling out for her, voice cracking, heart thudding like it was trying to escape. He remembered kneeling beside her and realizing she didn't even look like she could hear him. He remembered the helplessness, the terrible truth that being tall enough to reach the cabinets didn't mean you were tall enough to fix what had been broken. That was the first crack. The second crack came years later when he'd been foolish enough to believe he could build something different, an engagement, a future. Late night talks about children and holidays and the kind of house that would have a dog. He offered his whole heart like it was a gift, not a risk. And she had shattered it by climbing into bed with his best friend. The betrayal had been so clean, so quick, it almost felt surgical. A part of him had died that day. The part that believed love was safe. The part that believed people stayed when they said they would. After that, he had learned to keep his world orderly, controlled, predictable, no surprises, no soft spots. So why was he sitting here, 30 minutes deep into an empty date, in a place built for beginnings? Because his mother had asked. Because she had looked older lately. Because there were lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her voice had carried a quiet fear he didn't want to name. Because she had lost her own love story in a way that had nearly destroyed her, and somehow, impossibly, she still believed Adrian deserved one. He pushed his chair back, the sound soft against the rooftop's polished floor. Enough. He stood, smoothing the front of his jacket like he could iron out the sting of it, like he could press a crease into disappointment and call it done. He took one step away from the table. That was when the elevator doors opened. Adrian's gaze lifted automatically, expecting a woman in heels, a hesitant smile, an apology. What he saw instead didn't make sense. A little boy burst out, small enough that the world seemed too big for him. He couldn't have been more than 4. A red coat nearly swallowed his body, the sleeves too long, the hood bouncing as he ran. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his breath coming fast in panicked bursts. His eyes scanned the rooftop with desperate urgency, landing on Adrian like Adrian was the first solid thing he'd found in a shaking world. The boy ran straight to him. "Sir," his voice was small, but it sliced through the rooftop noise like a knife. "Sir, please, Mom's in trouble." Adrian froze. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way they were said, the way fear made a child sound older, the way the boy's little hands grabbed Adrian's sleeve as if Adrian could anchor him. For a strange, suspended second, the rooftop's warmth felt far away. Jazz turned into background static. The laughter blurred. All Adrian could see was a child pleading, eyes wide with terror, and something in Adrian's chest tightened like a fist. "Mom's in trouble," the boy repeated, swallowing hard. "A bad man is yelling at her." Adrian didn't ask why the boy had run to him. He didn't ask where the boy's mother was, why she hadn't come herself, why security hadn't already intervened. He didn't even ask the question that might have made this easier. Is this some kind of trick? Because those eyes weren't acting. That fear wasn't pretend. Adrian knew real fear. He'd lived beside it. He crouched slightly, lowering himself so his voice wouldn't tower over the boy. "Hey," he said, calm and steady, like he could lend the boy his composure. "What's your name?" "Theo," the boy breathed, barely audible. "Please." "Okay, Theo." Adrian's voice dropped even lower. "I'm going to help your mom, but you need to tell me where she is." Theo pointed with a trembling finger toward the door and the stairwell beyond. "Down there," he whispered. "She told me to run." Adrian's jaw tightened. A mother telling her child to run meant something had already gone too far. He moved. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He simply stepped past the tables, past the candlelight and the couples and the illusion of safety, following a little boy in a red coat toward a stairwell that swallowed the music the moment they entered. The air grew colder as they descended. The warmth of the rooftop disappeared behind them like a door closing on another life. Concrete replaced polished floor. The scent of perfume and coffee turned into the stale chill of a parking garage. Theo's hand stayed gripped around Adrian's sleeve as they hurried down, tiny fingers clutching like Adrian might vanish if he didn't hold tight. Adrian's mind scanned quickly, efficient as it always was. Parking garages were dangerous. Blind corners, shadows. No witnesses unless someone happened to walk by. Why here? Why had she come down here? He reached the bottom level and looked out. At first, he saw only columns and half-lit spaces and cars sleeping under gray lights. Then he saw them. In the far corner near a shadowed pillar, a large man had a woman pinned by the wrist. His body blocked hers, pressing her back to the wall. The woman struggled, but the man's grip looked like iron. The woman's curls fell over her face, but Adrian caught a glimpse of her eyes, and something inside him snapped sharply, like a string pulled too tight. Those eyes. Wide, terrified, trying to stay quiet because loud fear can make a predator angrier. Adrian had seen those eyes on his mother. He didn't pause. He crossed the distance in seconds, his footsteps silent on concrete until he was close enough that the man's head snapped up in surprise. "Let her go," Adrian said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of authority that made rooms fall quiet in board meetings, the kind of authority that didn't ask. The man sneered, trying to size him up. Mind your business. Adrian stepped closer, putting himself between the woman and the man in one fluid motion. His hand shot out, clamping around the man's forearm. He yanked hard. The man stumbled back, caught off balance, and the woman's wrist slipped free. Adrian didn't even look at the man again. His body shifted instinctively, blocking the woman completely, shielding her with the solid wall of his chest and shoulders. He could feel her shaking behind him. He could hear the stutter of her breath. "Security," Adrian shouted toward the stairwell, already pulling his phone from his pocket. "Call security now." The man's eyes flicked to Theo, still holding Adrian's sleeve, frozen, and then to Adrian's phone. He cursed, anger twisting his face, and for a second Adrian thought he might swing. But then the man turned and bolted into the shadows between the cars, disappearing like a rat slipping through cracks. Adrian stood still for a beat, listening, making sure the man wasn't circling back. When he was certain the threat had moved away, he exhaled slowly and turned. The woman pressed her back to the wall, one hand clutching her chest as if her heart might leap out. Her hair, blonde, long, was damp at the roots, curls clinging to her cheeks. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but only air came out at first. Theo darted to her side. "Mom!" he cried, his voice breaking. He wrapped his arms around her legs. The woman's hands flew to him, holding him like she could fuse him to her body. "Theo," she whispered, voice raw. "Oh, baby." Adrian watched her face, his mind taking in details without permission. The tremor in her fingers, the way she tried to inhale and couldn't get enough air, the way she kept glancing around, as if the man might reappear any second. Adrian stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head too quickly. "No, I'm sorry," she stammered, words tangled. "I didn't mean to cause, I was just—" Adrian lifted a hand slightly, a silent signal to stop apologizing for surviving. "You're safe now," he said. He meant it more than he expected to. Her gaze lifted to meet his fully, and the hit was immediate. Pain lived in her eyes, deep and old, not just fresh fear. Strength too, stubborn and fierce, the kind of strength that keeps you moving even when you're exhausted. And beneath it, something like a plea, unspoken, maybe even unconscious. "Don't leave." Adrian's throat tightened. He didn't know this woman. He didn't owe her anything. And yet, standing here in a cold parking garage, he had the strangest, clearest certainty. This time, he would not look away. Security arrived moments later, two men in dark uniforms moving quickly, asking questions. Adrian answered crisply, pointed in the direction the man had run, gave a brief description. The woman Maya, he learned when Theo clung to her and whispered her name, kept quiet, nodding, holding Theo, trying to keep herself together. Adrian didn't miss the way her knees trembled. "Do you have someone you can call?" Adrian asked once the guards went to check the garage. Maya's lips pressed together. "We're fine," she said again, voice thin. "Thank you for helping, we should go." Theo looked up at Adrian with wide eyes. "You're the guy from the roof," he blurted, as if that explained everything. "You were waiting." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yeah," he said softly, "I was waiting." Maya flinched at the word, like waiting was something dangerous, like promises were traps. She tried to stand straighter, to gather Theo and leave, but her body betrayed her. She wobbled slightly, one hand reaching for the wall. Adrian stepped forward automatically. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "Sit for a second, just breathe." "I can't," she whispered, barely audible. "If he finds—" Adrian's gaze sharpened. He asked. Maya swallowed, her eyes flicked away. "It doesn't matter." It mattered. Adrian could feel that in the tension in her shoulders, in the way Theo watched doors like a guard dog in a child's body. What kind of life made a 4-year-old look like that? What kind of man made a mother send her child running up to strangers? Adrian took off his coat without thinking and draped it gently around Maya's shoulders. She stiffened at first, like she expected it to be snatched away again. but then the warmth seemed to sink into her bones and her shoulders sagged a fraction. "Come back upstairs," Adrian said. "It's warmer. We'll sit for a minute and then you can decide what you want to do." Maya's mouth opened as if to protest, but Theo tugged her hand. "Please, Mommy," he whispered. "I'm cold." Maya's resolve wavered. Then reluctantly she nodded. Adrian guided them back into the elevator and up, into a private rooftop lounge away from the main cafe. The doors closed with a soft chime, shutting out the parking garage's echoing chill, but Maya still looked like she couldn't breathe. She sat stiffly on a couch. Theo curled tightly into her side, her arms wrapped around him like a lifeline. Her eyes kept darting to the exit, as if expecting the nightmare to follow them upstairs. Adrian moved quietly to a minibar and poured water into a glass. He didn't speak while he did it. He didn't crowd her with questions. He'd learned long ago that when someone is in shock, words can feel like pressure. He brought the water over and set it on the table in front of her with deliberate gentleness. "Here." Maya stared at it as if the glass might explode. Then her fingers reached for it slowly. They shook as she lifted it. Theo leaned into her. "Are you okay, Mommy?" he whispered. Adrian froze at that. Not because it was a strange question, because it was. It was painfully familiar. He remembered himself at 7 years old, standing in the dark kitchen while his mother sat at the table, hands shaking around a wedding ring she'd removed and put back on again, like she couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal or the emptiness. He remembered asking her that same question, over and over, as if repetition could heal. "Are you okay, Mommy?" His throat tightened. He turned slightly, pretending to adjust the bottle of water so Maya wouldn't see the expression that flickered across his face. Maya forced a smile at Theo, brittle as thin ice. "We're fine," she said. "Thank you, sweetheart." Theo didn't look convinced. His gaze flicked from Maya to Adrian and back again. He was too observant, too careful. "We might move again," Theo blurted softly, like it had been pressing on him and he couldn't hold it in. Maya's body went rigid. "Theo," she warned quietly, the way parents do when they're terrified of what their child might reveal. Theo shrank back a little, fingers twisting in her sleeve. "If the bad man finds us," he whispered, eyes down. The room seemed to tilt. Adrian sat down across from them, slow and controlled, but inside something churned. Move again. Find us again. How many times had this boy packed his life into boxes? How many times had Maya looked for a new place, a new job, a new set of locks, only to feel her safety evaporate? Maya swallowed, trying to regain control of her face. She straightened her back, her voice too bright. "We've had a rough year," she said. "Nothing we can't handle." Adrian didn't answer that lie with words. He just watched her, his gaze steady. He could see the exhaustion beneath her composure, the strain in her jaw from holding herself together. He could see that she'd been surviving for so long she didn't remember what it felt like to be safe. She shifted as if sitting still made the fear louder. "We should go," she said. "I appreciate what you did, but—" Her sentence didn't finish. Her skin went pale, almost gray, her breathing hitched. One hand flew to the armrest, knuckles white. She swayed, eyes unfocusing. Adrian was moving before he fully registered it. He caught her as she collapsed, his arms strong around her shoulders, lowering her gently to the floor. Theo cried out, scrambling down, tiny hands reaching for her face. "Mommy!" Adrian pressed 2 fingers to Maya's neck, feeling the fast, weak flutter of her pulse. His jaw clenched. She was too light, too fragile. Not fragile in spirit, no, her spirit was steel, but her body had been pushed too far. "Maya," Adrian said, voice low and urgent. "Stay with me, can you hear me?" Her lashes fluttered, but she didn't respond. Theo's sob turned into a whimper. "Mommy, please." Adrian looked at him, forcing calm into his tone. "Theo," he said gently, "she's going to be okay, but we need to help her all right." Theo's eyes were huge and wet. He nodded, trusting Adrian with the kind of blind faith Adrian didn't feel he deserved. Adrian lifted Maya into his arms. Her head lolled against his shoulder, curls brushing his jaw. She smelled faintly like coffee and cold air and something floral that might have been shampoo if she'd had time to use it. He felt Theo clutch his sleeve as they moved out of the lounge. Adrian didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for her to wake and protest. He just did what needed to be done. He carried her through the elevator, out into the night to his car. Theo climbed into the back seat, pulling himself up with determination, and Adrian carefully settled Maya so her head rested against Theo's lap. Theo's tiny hand stroked her hair in trembling motions, like he was trying to pet her back to life. Adrian slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. He called his private physician before he even pulled away from the curb. "I need you at St. Jude's ER entrance," he said, his voice clipped. 20 minutes, no delays." He didn't wait for questions. He ended the call and drove. The city lights streaked past, smearing into gold and white. Traffic parted faster than usual, as if the universe had decided to cooperate for once. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His mind raced through possibilities, fainting from shock, low blood sugar, panic, something worse. Theo's voice came from the back seat, small and shaky. "Is she going to die?" Adrian's chest tightened. "No," he said firmly, even though he couldn't be sure. He glanced into the rearview mirror and met Theo's gaze. "She's not. I won't let that happen." It was a promise that rose out of him like instinct, like the part of him that once watched his mother crumble and swore he'd never be powerless again, had finally found its moment. Theo nodded slowly, as if anchoring himself to Adrian's certainty. He kept stroking Maya's hair. Adrian drove faster. This was not supposed to happen. Not tonight. Not on a night that had begun with a blind date he hadn't wanted. And yet, deep in his chest, something whispered a truth he didn't know how to name. Maybe he hadn't been waiting for a date at all. Maybe he had been waiting for them. The hospital's antiseptic smell hit Maya before her eyes even opened. The steady beep of machines threaded through the silence. Her lashes fluttered, her vision blurred, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. Her body felt heavy. Her throat felt dry. Then she felt warmth. A hand holding hers. She turned her head slowly and her gaze landed on Adrian sitting beside the bed. His suit jacket was off now, sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. His posture was still controlled, still composed, but his eyes were tired, focused entirely on her like she was the only thing in the room. "You're awake," he said softly, relief flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. Maya's lips parted. "Theo," she rasped, panic rising instantly. "Where is Theo?" "He's fine," Adrian said quickly. "He's sleeping in the next room. He didn't want to let go of your hand." Maya's chest ached, not from whatever had knocked her unconscious, but from the sharp tenderness of that. Of course Theo hadn't wanted to let go. He never wanted to let go. He had learned too young that if you let go, you might lose someone. She tried to sit up. Adrian's hand moved gently to her shoulder, not forcing, just steadying. "Don't," he murmured. "The doctor said you collapsed from extreme exhaustion and stress." "I shouldn't be here," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "They'll have my name. He could find us." Adrian's brows drew together. "The records are under my name," he said. "No one will connect you. You're safe." Safe? The word struck her like a foreign language. Safe was what people said before they left you exposed. Safe was what she'd tried to build with locks and moving trucks and cheap motels. Safe was what Gavin had stolen from her piece by piece. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," she whispered. Adrian didn't flinch. "I'm already involved," he said quietly, as if it were a fact, not a choice. A knock sounded and the doctor entered, a woman in her 40s with calm eyes and an efficient presence. She glanced at the chart, then at Maya, then at Adrian. "Your vitals are stabilizing," she said, but your body is under enormous strain. Maya opened her mouth. I'm fine, she said too quickly like it was a reflex. The doctor's expression didn't change, but her tone sharpened slightly. You're malnourished, sleep-deprived, and your blood pressure has been dangerously low for days, she said. This isn't fine. This is your body waving a white flag. Maya swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, but her limbs still felt heavy. It was hard to fight when your body was tired of war. The doctor's gaze flicked to Adrian. Make sure she eats something, she said, and rests, real rest. Then she left, the door clicking softly behind her. Maya's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She turned her face away from Adrian, ashamed of collapsing, ashamed of being seen like this, ashamed of needing anything. I can't stay, she whispered. I can't. Theo's voice drifted from the hallway, sleepy and soft. Is Mommy okay? Adrian didn't even stand up. He answered gently, voice steady. She's safe, Theo, she's okay. Maya's breath caught, safe, again. She pressed her lips together so hard they hurt. Later that night, after Theo fell asleep curled on a small sofa in the corner of the hospital room, Maya sat propped against pillows, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold herself together. The light from the hallway cast a dim glow, painting everything in gray-blue shadows. Adrian remained in the chair beside the bed. He didn't crowd her. He didn't fill the silence with questions. He just stayed. That was what undid her the most. You don't have to be here, Maya whispered finally, voice rough. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. I know, he said. Maya let out a broken laugh that sounded more like a sob. Then why are you? Adrian hesitated, his jaw tightening as if admitting the truth cost him something. Then he spoke, quietly, like he was telling her a secret he'd never shared. I was 7, he said. I watched my mother fall apart when my father left. She didn't ask for help, she didn't know how, and I didn't know how to give it. Maya's eyes flicked toward him despite herself. I remember standing in the kitchen and asking her if she was okay, Adrian continued, his voice low, over and over, and she kept smiling and saying she was fine, but she was. She was breaking right in front of me. Maya's throat tightened painfully. Adrian's hands folded together in his lap, controlled, but she saw the tension in his knuckles. I swore I'd never be powerless again, he said. I swore I'd never watch someone I cared about fall apart and do nothing. Maya looked away, staring at the blanket, blinking hard. We've moved 6 times in 2 years, she said flatly, the confession spilling out like it had been waiting. Every time Gavin finds us, every time I think we're safe, it turns out he's just impatient. Adrian's jaw clenched at the name. Gavin, he repeated softly. Maya nodded. I stopped making friends, she whispered. Stopped trusting anyone, because people who help me always end up getting hurt. I've seen it happen. She finally looked at Adrian, eyes glistening. And now you're here doing more than anyone ever has, she said, and I don't know how to handle it. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Let me help you, he said. I can get you legal protection. I can get you somewhere safe. I can. No, Maya's voice cut through the room sharp as a blade. Panic lit behind her eyes. No, please don't. You don't understand how dangerous he is. He doesn't stop. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't. Adrian's gaze stayed steady. I understand dangerous, he said quietly, and I understand what it means to be alone in it. Maya shook her head, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Please, she whispered, the word breaking. Don't get involved. I can't have someone else hurt because of me. Adrian stood. Maya's breath caught. Was he leaving? Was he proving her right? Was this the part where kindness faded the moment it got inconvenient? He walked to the side table near the door and set down a small bag. Then he came back to her bed, not too close, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, and he did something that made her throat close completely. He pulled the hospital blanket up around her shoulders with careful hands, not possessive, not demanding, just gentle, protective, as if she mattered. He moved to Theo on the sofa, adjusting the little boy's arm so it rested securely over the edge of the bed, letting Theo remain connected to her even in sleep. Theo's fingers curled slightly, finding the blanket, as if even unconscious he needed to anchor himself. Adrian didn't kiss her, didn't touch her face, didn't try to claim a moment. He just made sure she was warm. Then he walked out without another word. Maya stared at the door after it closed, her heart hammering. Why would a man do that? Why would he stay and then leave quietly, like helping her wasn't a transaction, like it didn't come with a price? Her gaze drifted to the bag. She reached for it slowly, half expecting it to disappear like a mirage. Inside, she found a fresh sandwich, a soft hoodie, and a thermos of herbal tea. Simple things, comfort things, the kind of things she hadn't allowed herself to want because wanting made you vulnerable. She pressed the hoodie to her chest, her eyes burned. She didn't cry, not fully, but something inside her shifted, a crack forming in the wall she'd built around her heart. Morning came with gray light and stiff fear. Maya checked Theo's forehead the way she always did, packed their few things with quick, practiced hands, signed the discharge forms under a fake name because she had learned that paper trails were dangerous. She didn't look back as she left. But outside in the cold air her feet slowed. Across the street. Inside a black SUV, Adrian sat behind the wheel. He didn't wave. He didn't approach. He didn't force her to acknowledge him. He just watched, as if he needed to see them walk away to know they made it out. Maya's eyes met his for a brief moment, and something warm and terrifying surged through her chest. He hadn't let go. A week passed. Adrian didn't call. He didn't send messages. He told himself he was respecting her boundary. He told himself that someone like Maya, someone who had lived with fear pressed against her throat, needed space more than she needed another man trying to save her. He told himself he was doing the right thing. But the truth was, peace didn't follow. Her face haunted him, those eyes, the tremor in her hands, the way she forced smiles that didn't reach her soul. Thea haunted him too, with his too careful gaze and his tiny hand clutching Adrian's sleeve like Adrian was a lifeboat. Adrian found himself scanning crowds unconsciously, half expecting to see a little red coat. He found himself listening for small footsteps. He hated it. He hated how quickly they had gotten under his skin. One morning, he stepped into a quiet bookstore on a side street to pick up a rare edition for his mother's birthday. He should have been focused. He should have been thinking about work. Instead, as he exited the bookstore, the smell of coffee drifted from the cafe next door, and his head turned before he could stop it. Through the wide front window, he saw her. Maya stood behind the counter in a plain black apron. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, blonde curls spilling down her back. She carried a tray with 2 mugs, smiling faintly at an older customer. The smile looked real for a second, small, but real, until she turned and winced, pressing a hand to her lower back as if her body was still paying for whatever life demanded of her. Adrian's chest tightened. He didn't go in. He just watched her for a moment, unnoticed, then walked away. But he didn't forget the cafe's address. But Adrian didn't speak like a man selling her a dream. He spoke like a man stating a vow he'd already made inside himself. Maya looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. She tried to open Theo's cookie box absent-mindedly, fumbling with the seal, and the small failure made her chest tighten, because she was so tired of struggling with everything, even tiny things. Without a word, Adrian stepped forward just enough to help. He gently took the edge of the lid, opened it, then stepped back immediately, giving her space again. He didn't try to touch her. He didn't try to fix her. He just made it easier. That small gesture cracked something inside her. For once, she didn't run. They stood in silence for a moment, the street lamp above them flickering softly, the city around them humming. Theo's delighted crunching filled the quiet with something normal. Adrian turned as if to leave, not wanting to push his luck. Maya's voice stopped him. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper, "for seeing me." Adrian glanced back, his eyes softer than she expected. He nodded once. And this time, Maya didn't look away. The air turned colder over the next few days, the kind of cold that slipped into bones. Maya kept telling herself Adrian's kindness was temporary. She kept waiting for the moment when he asked for something. Attention, gratitude, a piece of her life he could claim. But he didn't. He sent warmth in quiet ways instead. A grocery delivery left under her apartment door with no note at all, just fresh fruit, soup ingredients, Theo's favorite cereal. A small children's book mailed to the daycare with Theo's name written neatly inside. A new lock installed on her apartment door while she was at work, done by a security company that never asked questions. Every act felt like a gentle hand on her back saying, "You can breathe." And every act terrified her, because if kindness could exist like this, why hadn't anyone given it to her before? Then the night came that answered that question with brutal clarity. Maya picked Theo up from daycare, zipped his coat up to his chin, and started walking home. Theo swung their joined hands happily, humming to himself, unaware. Halfway down the street, Maya froze. A figure leaned against the gate of her apartment complex. Tall, broad shoulders, dark jeans, leather jacket. Gavin. Her lungs seized. Her grip on Theo's hand tightened so suddenly he yelped. Gavin lifted his head slowly, like he'd been enjoying the wait. His smile was softer than she remembered, but that was what made it worse. Gavin always wore softness like camouflage. "Hey," he called. "Maya, please, I just want to talk." Maya's vision narrowed. All she could hear was her own heartbeat. She scooped Theo into her arms instantly and turned, moving fast toward the back entrance. Her mind screamed one word. "Run!" Gavin pushed off the gate and followed. "I've changed," he said, voice rising. "I'm clean, I got therapy, I just want to see my son." Maya didn't answer. She shoved the door open with shaking hands, got Theo inside, slammed it behind them, and slid the bolt with frantic fingers. Theo clung to her neck, confused. "Mommy." Maya pressed her face into his hair for a split second, inhaling him like oxygen. From the other side of the door, Gavin's voice shifted. The softness evaporated. The control surfaced like a blade. "Run again," he said, loud enough to echo down the hallway. "And next time I won't miss you." Maya's legs nearly gave out. She waited until silence returned, until she was sure he'd gone, before she moved. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock her phone. She stared at the screen, chest heaving, and one thought rose with brutal clarity. She couldn't do this alone anymore. She had said she wouldn't call him. She had promised herself she wouldn't drag Adrian into her chaos. But what was worse, dragging him in or letting Gavin keep hunting them until something irreversible happened. Her thumb hovered over the number she'd never dialed before. Then she pressed it. Adrian answered on the first ring. "Maya," his voice was alert instantly. "What's wrong?" Maya's throat closed. Words broke apart. "I need help," she managed, voice cracking. "I'm coming," Adrian said immediately. "No questions, no hesitation, just certainty. Stay inside, lock everything, I'll be there in 15. Maya sank to the floor with Theo in her lap, shaking. 15 minutes later, Adrian arrived. When he stepped into her apartment, he didn't demand explanations. He didn't look around like he was judging the small space or the mismatched furniture or the way Maya's life looked like someone who had been running. He looked at her, and the moment his gaze landed on her shaking hands, his jaw tightened. He knelt in front of her, voice gentle. "Where is he?" Outside earlier, Maya whispered. He was waiting, he found us again. Adrian's eyes darkened. Okay, he said, calm like a storm contained. We're leaving tonight. Maya's stomach dropped. No, she whispered automatically. We can't. Adrian reached out, not touching her at first, just hovering close enough that she could feel the warmth. Maya, he said softly, you called me. Let me do what you called me for. Theo stared at Adrian with wide, trusting eyes. Adrian's gaze softened when it touched the boy. Adrian stood, took a warm coat and wrapped it around Theo carefully. Then, with a gentleness that made Maya's eyes burn, Adrian took Maya's hand. Not gripping, not claiming, just holding as if to say, I'm here, you're not alone. He guided them both out. They didn't go to Adrian's home. Maya realized that quickly as the car turned away from the wealthy neighborhoods and headed toward a discreet luxury hotel tucked under one of Adrian's company partnerships. Adrian didn't explain much. He didn't need to. His silence wasn't cold. It was focused. The sweetie brought them to had soundproof windows, a small kitchenette, and shockingly, a shelf stocked with children's books and toys. Maya stared at it in disbelief. Adrian shrugged slightly as if it was nothing. I like to be prepared, he said. Theo ran to the shelf, squealing softly when he found a dinosaur book. Adrian knelt to help him with his shoes, movement steady and calm. Theo leaned into him without fear, as if Adrian had always been part of his life. Maya's throat tightened. Later, after Theo fell asleep on the couch wrapped in a blanket, Maya stood by the window, staring at the city below. Her arms curled around herself like armor. She felt Adrian approach before she heard him. He stopped just short of her chair, not invading her space. She kept staring at the lights, voice barely above a whisper. Why does he always find me? She asked, more to the glass than to Adrian. Why can't we just be free? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, soft but certain. Because you never had someone to protect you, he said. Maya turned her head slightly, eyes shining. Adrian met her gaze. But now you do. Something in Maya's chest cracked. Adrian didn't reach for her. He didn't try to pull her into his arms and call it romance. Instead, he walked to the kitchenette, opened a drawer and made ginger tea with careful hands, as if the act itself was a promise. He placed the mug beside her gently, and let the steam rise between them like a quiet bridge. Maya looked down at the mug, then up at him, and her eyes welled. She didn't cry, she just nodded once, small, trembling. Adrian gave her a last glance that felt like a vow, then moved to the couch and settled near Theo, keeping watch in silence. That night something shifted in the warm quiet of the hotel room, not just in Maya's world but in Adrian, too. He realized, with a startling clarity, that he wasn't just protecting them because it was the right thing to do. He was protecting them because he wanted them, because they mattered to him, because they had become a piece of him without asking permission. And that terrified him more than any boardroom battle ever had. The next morning began softly. Adrian had quietly arranged an apartment under Maya's name, far from her old neighborhood. It wasn't extravagant, but it was safe, quiet, clean, filled with small, thoughtful details, an extra lock, curtains that actually blocked the outside view, a fridge stocked with food Theo liked. There was even a small nightlight shaped like a star in Theo's room. Maya told herself she shouldn't accept it. She told herself she should refuse and run and prove she could handle life alone. But Theo slept that night without waking up crying, and Maya realized she had forgotten what silence could feel like when it wasn't dangerous. She started to hope. And then the school called. Theo was missing. The words didn't register at first. Maya stood in the kitchen holding her phone, staring at the wall as if her mind couldn't translate the sound into meaning. Missing. Her legs buckled. She dropped to the floor, breath tearing out of her chest. Then she saw it. A plain envelope tucked into her mailbox slot. Maya crawled to it like her body was on autopilot. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside, one handwritten line. "You want your son, come alone." Maya's scream ripped through the apartment. Adrian arrived moments later, because he had set security in place, because he had insisted on checks, because he had known Gavin wouldn't stop. When he burst through the door and saw Maya crumpled on the floor clutching the note, something in his eyes changed. It wasn't just anger. It was something darker, something primal. Maya looked up at him, face streaked with tears. "He has Theo," she whispered, voice breaking. "Oh God, Adrian, he took him." Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, his voice steady even as fire lit behind his eyes. "We will get him back," he said. "I promise you." Maya shook in his arms. What if he? Adrian cupped the back of her head gently, grounding her. "He won't," he said, as if certainty could become reality. "Not while I'm breathing." Then Adrian moved like a man who had been built for crisis. Calls went out. His private security team mobilized, trained, ex-military, silent. His legal team filed emergency orders and contacted authorities to accelerate tracking protocols. Adrian pulled strings Maya didn't even know existed, turning every contact and resource into a weapon against the chaos Gavin had created. Cameras were checked. Facial recognition flagged a sighting near a gas station off a state highway. A boy in a red coat. A man beside him. A vehicle plate. Adrian stared at the image on a screen. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. Theo. Theo looked small even through pixels. He looked pale. He looked like he was trying to be brave. Adrian's chest tightened painfully. They traced the car to a secluded cabin in upstate New York. Adrian didn't wait for the police to move at their pace. He coordinated with them, but he moved too, because Theo wasn't just a child to him now. Theo was Theo. A boy with chocolate chip crumbs on his fingers. A boy who called Adrian the guy with the comfy car. A boy who had already lost too much safety. Adrian and Maya were in the car before Maya could even fully process what was happening. The forest around the cabin was too quiet. Adrian's team moved first, shadows slipping through trees, circling the perimeter. Adrian kept Maya in the car at first, voice low and firm. "Stay here," he said. "We'll." "No," Maya said, voice cutting through him. Her eyes were wild, fierce. "That's my son." Adrian stared at her. For a moment he wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from whatever waited inside. Then he saw something in her face. Not helplessness, not fear. Power. The kind of power a mother finds when someone threatens her child. Adrian nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly, "but you listen to me, you don't do anything reckless." Maya's laugh was sharp and broken. "Reckless," she whispered. "Adrian, my whole life has been reckless because I've been forced to survive." They moved toward the cabin. Inside, Gavin was packing, yelling into a burner phone, voice harsh. Theo sat on the floor, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes big but dry, like he'd cried all his tears already. When the door burst open, Gavin spun and grabbed Theo, yanking him upright like a shield. "One step closer," Gavin snarled, "and he's gone. I'll take him out of this country. You'll never see him again." Adrian's whole body tensed, every instinct screaming to rush in and end Gavin. But the first person to step forward was Adrian. It was Maya. She walked into the room alone, hands raised, voice steady. "Let him go," she said. "Gavin, let him go." Gavin's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile spreading. "So you finally showed up," he said. "I knew you would, you always do." Maya swallowed, but her voice didn't shake. "Not like this," she said. "Not anymore." Gavin laughed, short and bitter. "You're nothing without me," he snapped. "You'll come back like always." Maya took a step closer. "You're wrong," she said. "I have people now. I have someone who doesn't want to break me." Adrian stood just outside the doorway, fists clenched, forcing himself not to move. This wasn't about him saving her. This was about her reclaiming herself. Maya's gaze held Gavin's. "And I have a son," she said, voice thick but firm. "Our son, and he deserves better than this." Theo lifted his head. His little voice came out quiet but clear. "I don't want to go with you." Gavin blinked, caught off guard. That split second of hesitation was all the security team needed. Two men moved like lightning. Gavin was disarmed and restrained within seconds. Theo stumbled free. Adrian surged forward and scooped Theo into his arms. Holding him so tightly, Theo made a small sound of relief and buried his face in Adrian's chest. "You're safe," Adrian whispered into his hair. I've got you, I've got you." Theo clung to him like a lifeline. Maya's knees went weak. She sank to the floor, hands over her mouth, shaking with a sob that finally escaped. Police arrived shortly after. The cabin was searched. Burner phones were confiscated. Threats were recorded. Theo's statement was taken carefully, gently, with specialists trained to speak to children. With Adrian's legal team and the evidence gathered, Gavin's case became airtight. Kidnapping, child endangerment, harassment, violation of restraining orders. Adrian's lawyers had already rushed through in emergency filings. When it was over, when Gavin was led away in handcuffs, he twisted to glare back at Maya. "This isn't over," he spat. Adrian stepped in front of Maya instinctively, blocking that glare with his body. His eyes were ice. "It is for you," Adrian said quietly, and somehow the calmness in his voice sounded more terrifying than shouting. "Because I will make sure you never touch them again." Gavin's smile faltered for the first time. Outside the station later, as dawn smeared pale light across the sky, Maya leaned against Adrian, her body shaking, not from fear now, but from release. Theo slept in Adrian's arms, finally worn down by exhaustion. "You kept your promise," Maya whispered, voice cracked. Adrian looked down at her, his expression softer. "You kept yours too," he said. "You faced him, you didn't run." Maya's eyes filled again. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. Adrian lifted a hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Then let's stop," he said. The weeks that followed weren't perfect, because healing never is. There were court hearings, paperwork, therapy appointments, security checks. Maya still startled at loud noises. She still checked locks twice. She still woke some nights with her heart racing, expecting to hear Gavin's voice in the hallway. Adrian didn't pretend he could erase the past. He didn't tell her to move on like pain was a switch she could flip. He simply showed up, again and again, with the steady patience of someone willing to build safety brick by brick. Sometimes that safety looked like Adrian sitting on the floor of Theo's room, reading dinosaur books in a voice that made Theo giggle. Sometimes it looked like Adrian cooking pasta badly, and then ordering takeout with a sheepish look that made Maya laugh for real for the first time in weeks. Sometimes it looked like Adrian quietly replacing a broken window latch without mentioning it, as if making her home safer was as natural as breathing. Maya didn't know how to accept it at first. She kept waiting for the cost. She kept waiting for the moment Adrian would tire of her scars. But he didn't. Instead, he asked questions no one had asked her gently before. Not interrogations, just curiosity that felt like care. "What do you need today?" he would ask. "Did you sleep at all?" he'd murmur, handing her tea. "Do you want me close or do you want space?" he'd ask, and then actually respect her answer. And Maya found herself asking questions too, questions she hadn't dared to ask because hope made you vulnerable. What if safety could last? What if love didn't mean losing yourself? What if the kind of man Adrian was, quiet, steady, protective without controlling, was real? And what if she could believe in it? One afternoon, Adrian brought Maya and Theo to meet his mother. Maya's stomach twisted the entire drive. She kept thinking, what if she looks at me and sees trouble? What if she looks at Theo and sees baggage? What if she looks at Adrian and thinks I'm the kind of mess that will ruin him? They arrived at a quiet garden tucked away from the city noise, sunlit and calm, lavender bushes swaying in a gentle breeze. Maya stood near a wrought iron bench, twisting the hem of her blouse nervously. Adrian stood beside her, his hand hovering near her lower back, not touching, just present, as if he wanted her to feel his support without pressure. A car pulled up and a dignified woman stepped out. Silver-streaked hair, tailored coat, sharp elegance. Eleanor Blackwell carried herself like someone who had survived heartbreak and still chose grace. Maya instinctively shifted slightly behind Theo. Theo, unaware of adult tension, crouched to blow on a dandelion. Eleanor watched him, a smile tugging at her lips. "Is that your brave little knight?" she asked softly. Theo looked up, curls bouncing. "Mommy says I'm a protector," he announced proudly. Maya's throat tightened. Eleanor's gaze lifted to Maya then, careful, curious, but not cold. Maya swallowed and forced herself forward. "I know we're not what you imagined for your son," Maya said, voice shaky. "I know this is complicated." Eleanor's smile didn't fade. She glanced at Adrian and something softened in her eyes. "My son hasn't smiled in years," she said quietly. "Not really. Not the way he smiled when he talked about you too." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, emotion flashing. Eleanor stepped closer to Maya, gentle. "That's all I need to know," she said. Maya's eyes burned. The wall around her heart cracked wider. "Thank you," Maya whispered. Eleanor touched her arm lightly. "Welcome, Maya," she said, truly. It was the first time in a long, long while Maya felt seen. Not as a problem, not as a burden, but as a person worthy of belonging. That evening, the three of them walked through glowing tunnels of a nearby light park. Strings of golden lights curled around trees. Lanterns floated in a small lake. Children's laughter filled the air like music. Theo rode on Adrian's shoulders, pointing at everything with endless wonder. "There's a dragon, and a castle, and a spaceship." Adrian chuckled. "You sure you're not mixing fairy tales and sci-fi?" "Nope," Theo declared. "It's all real." Maya walked beside them, coat unbuttoned, curls loose around her shoulders. She hadn't smiled this much in years. The warmth in her chest felt strange, almost like she didn't know where to put it. She watched Adrian listen to Theo like every word mattered, like Theo was the most important person in the world. "You're really good with him," Maya murmured, nudging Adrian's arm gently. Adrian glanced down at her, eyes soft. "He's a great kid," he said, "brave, kind." Maya's lips curved. Then she teased without meaning to, "And what about the mom?" The moment the words left her mouth, she flushed. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. She hadn't meant to reach for something so intimate. Adrian's smile softened instead of turning smug. "She's stronger than she knows," he said, "and I'm lucky just to walk beside her." Maya looked away quickly, blinking back tears. She wasn't used to words like that, words that weren't manipulation or empty promises, but truth spoken gently. At the exit of the light park, Theo leaned forward and whispered into Adrian's ear. Adrian paused, then laughed. "What did he say?" Maya asked, curious despite herself. Adrian looked at her, eyes bright. "He said he doesn't want this night to end." Maya reached up and brushed her fingers against Theo's ankle lightly. "Me neither," she whispered. Adrian stopped walking. He turned to her fully, the lights reflecting in his eyes. "You once said we felt like a family," he said quietly. Maya's heart thudded. She nodded, unable to speak. Adrian's gaze moved between her and Theo, and his voice dropped to something almost reverent. "That's because we are." The words settled around Maya like warmth. Family. Not something perfect, not something easy. Something built piece by piece, choice by choice, kindness by kindness. Weeks turned into months. The court case moved forward. Gavin's threats lost power as legal walls rose around Maya and Theo. The restraining order became ironclad. Gavin's access vanished. Maya learned what it felt like to sleep without listening for footsteps. She still had scars. Adrian still had his own. But slowly, they began to stitch something new together. Sometimes healing looked like Maya laughing at Adrian's terrible cooking. Sometimes it looked like Adrian sitting on the floor beside her after a nightmare, not touching her until she reached for him, just being there, steady as a lighthouse. Sometimes it looked like Theo drawing a picture of the three of them holding hands and sticking it on the fridge like it was a holy thing. One night, Maya found Adrian standing on the balcony of their building, staring out at the city. His face looked distant. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Adrian exhaled. "I used to believe love was just a word people used before they left," he admitted. Maya's chest tightened. Adrian turned to her, his gaze vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Then you showed up," he said, "and you didn't ask for anything. You just existed, and somehow you reminded me what it means to care." Maya swallowed hard. "I was a mess," she whispered. Adrian's mouth curved. "You were brave," he corrected, "and you still are." Maya's eyes filled. Adrian reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she needed. She didn't. He laced his fingers through hers, and Maya realized she wasn't afraid of that anymore. Not because fear was gone, but because trust was growing. And then the night came that brought everything full circle. The rooftop cafe again, crisp air touched by the hush of approaching snowfall. The skyline glittered. Warm light spilled from the windows. It looked different now, not because the city had changed, but because Adrian had. He stood near the same table, hands in his coat pockets. But this time, he wasn't waiting with bitterness. He was waiting with certainty. The elevator doors opened, and Maya stepped out. Her hair was loose, gently curled like it had been that first night. She wore a dark wool coat, simple and elegant. When she met Adrian's eyes, there was no fear in her gaze now, only something steady, something hopeful. Adrian walked toward her slowly, not rushing, as if he wanted to memorize every step. "You came," he said softly. Maya's smile curved, small but real. "I always come now," she whispered. Adrian led her to the table where 2 cups of coffee steamed in the cold air. Maya sat, her hands resting lightly on the tabletop. Adrian sat across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the city humming around them. Adrian slid something onto the table, a small velvet box. Maya's breath caught. Her heart thudded so hard it felt like it might shake the skyline. Adrian didn't open it immediately. Instead, he watched her, gaze steady. "When I first came here," he began, voice low, "I didn't believe in second chances. I didn't believe in anything, really." Maya didn't interrupt. She waited, eyes shining. "But you and Theo," Adrian swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. "You showed me what real courage looks like, what real love is. You didn't need saving. You just needed someone to stand beside you." Maya's eyes filled with tears. Adrian opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. No flashy diamonds, no showy display. Just a smooth band, and when Maya leaned closer, she saw tiny words engraved inside. "You are safe now." Maya's breath shuddered. Adrian didn't kneel. He didn't need to. His voice softened. "I don't just want to protect you," he said. "I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up and know you're here. I want to laugh with Theo over spilled cereal and bad jokes. I want the quiet days and the hard days. I want all of it, with you." Maya stared at the ring, tears sliding down her cheeks openly now. "Are you sure?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I come with a child, with scars, with chaos, with fear." Adrian reached across the table and took her hand gently, turning her palm up. He placed the ring in her hand instead of forcing it onto her finger, as if to say, This is your choice. You also come with love, he said quietly, with courage, with everything I never knew I needed. Maya's tears fell, and she didn't wipe them away. She nodded once, small and shaking. Yes, she whispered, yes. A sudden sound of small, excited footsteps interrupted them. Mom, Adrian. Theo came sprinting out of the elevator, wearing his favorite superhero cape. It fluttered behind him like joy made visible. He skidded to a stop beside the table, eyes wide. Are you going to be my forever daddy? Adrian's throat tightened. He rose from his chair and dropped to one knee, not for Maya but for Theo. I already am, Adrian said softly. Theo's face crumpled with happiness, and he flung himself into Adrian's arms. Adrian hugged him tight, eyes closing for a second like he was holding something sacred. Maya joined them, kneeling beside Adrian, wrapping her arms around both of them. For a long moment, the world faded. It was just the three of them, hearts pressed close, breath mingling in the cold air. Snow began to fall, gentle and slow, like the sky itself was exhaling in relief. Maya looked up through her tears and laughed softly. Of course it snows, she whispered. Adrian's mouth curved. New York loves drama, he murmured. Theo stuck out his tongue to catch snowflakes. It tastes like cold, he announced proudly. Maya laughed again, warmer this time. Adrian's eyes softened as he watched her, like the sound of her laughter was a gift he didn't want to lose. A small scrap of paper tumbled across the table, caught by the wind. Maya reached out and snagged it before it could fly away. She unfolded it slowly. Blind date, 7 p.m. table 4. Maya stared at it, then looked at Adrian with a tearful smile. Seems like the universe knew what it was doing, she whispered. Adrian chuckled softly. It did, he said, even when I didn't. Maya folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket like a treasure. It brought me home, she said, voice quiet and full. Adrian reached for her hand, and she let him, squeezing back. Under the falling snow, under the city lights, they stood together, not born from perfection, not built from easy beginnings, but formed from love that showed up quietly, again and again, in the moments that mattered. Love that wasn't loud. Love that was protection without control, kindness without a price, patience without a timer. Love that asked gently in the darkest moments, "Are you okay?" and then stayed long enough to help you become okay. If this journey of healing, hope, and second chances stayed with you, remember this. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin with a trembling child in a red coat, a frightened whisper in the cold, and one person choosing not to look away.